is going on with you guys on this beautiful day? It is so beautiful out here where I am. I'm in Georgia, um, but it looks like it is going to rain. So, real quick, I just wanted to do a check in. 2026, y'all, has been very, very interesting. Um, Engulfing, so to speak, I would say. Um, and I felt like all the times that I've been making New Year's resolutions over the course of my life, I've never felt this way. But what I have felt is a shift every single time that I am intentional about my growth. Every single time that I can take you know, I can acknowledge or take accountability is what I want to say. Anytime that I learn to take accountability and I was intentional about seeing a reflection of who I am. And I think that's the best strategy for learning your identity at a level of shifting, because identity is not just about becoming this one person for the rest of your life and you ride it out. No, identity is about becoming something and how to sustain what you are becoming. There is always something that you're going to feel, something that you're going to take notice to. You have a sense of awareness to know when it's time for a shift in identity. I was I'm working on a new book, and I'm so excited about this book because for me, it shows my growth level. It shows a whole new version of my identity. And since I've been writing, and it has taught me that some of the people that started out with me when I start to write may not be the people that will still be I may not have the same audience, because as you grow, um, sometimes you can't entertain the same people. And not that I'm purposely not trying to entertain someone, but some people are still at a level of who you used to be. And they still want you to feed them where it sounds good and it feels good, but they're not putting forth the effort to change and shift. And so the level of your growth will shift you to a whole new audience, right? And so that's what I've learned. And the reason I'm sharing this, because when I remember when it first came to my attention, I felt the way. I even found myself trying to write based off of people being able to relate, some of the old version of myself. And so it came to me, no, you are growing. It is not meant for you to purposely try to entertain a group of people. This is what growth looks like. This is what identity shifting looks like. You're no longer that person. So why are you trying to be something that you no longer are? And it showed me more about myself, that maybe there's still some form of people pleasing in you, because instead of you paying attention to the lecture and the lesson, you're busy trying to please someone. You're busy still trying to entertain someone, and the picture is bigger than that. It says that you are people pleasing. You haven't mastered not being okay with being misunderstood. Like, yeah, so that's the thing that you have to work on. So when there's an identity shift, you pay attention to those things, because it will show you at the core the things that you are to be working on. And it matters, because if you ignore those things, then you find yourself stuck in a cycle, and the things that you are doing, it doesn't seem like they are relevant, because now you're creating something that's not your true self. You're creating a facade, something that is fraudulent, and you didn't work so hard to do that. But these are the things that, it seems like a crisis, but those are the things that will happen along the way, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video and talk to you all, because a lot of things that happen to us on ground level in that moment and that season of our lives, when we're going through so many things, opposition seems so big, because the problem seems so big, the issue seems so big, and the truth is, it's not big. We just can't see anything in that particular moment because we're in it. So what I learned in 2026 is, looking back in retrospect of everything that I've did over the course of my life, I realized like God had me on a training ground. And sometimes training ground is ground level. We want elevation, we want different want God to delegate us this role or this season of our lives that we've been, what people say, manifesting. No, what's happening is God cannot just set you in a, it's nothing wrong with dreaming big. It's nothing wrong with um having dreams and goals, but just to plan this big life and you not change internally, how do you expect to steward these things that you are making plans for? How do you expect to fulfill these goals or these dreams that you've been making plans for? So I and I want to share this with you because I feel like it's important. And I'm saying this because scripture tells us that you have to have an ear to hear. Ear to hear is not just to be informed, it's to put things into practice. And so I remember having this conversation with God, and I remember the way he answered me. When God answers you, sometimes it's not in the, it's not, this is why he said have an ear to hear, because the way that God is going to answer you is not always in our language. When I say our, I mean humanity. He's going to speak most of the time in a parable way. Like he's going to give you a parable. He's going to give you an allegory. And I literally started to see visions, and it was like grain in a jar. And I started to see where God was just spiraling down in the soil. And I just seen where it was like my spirit is mounted up above a mountain. And I was like, okay, God, I can admit I was in my feelings. I was trying to control how God was going to speak to me. When you're in your feelings, but at the end of the day, baby, get out your feelings, because God can never ever be controlled. He's going to do things his way, because why would he do someone who in that moment has an unstable mind full of emotions do it their way? If because God has your best interest, he's not going to do something that will enable you or make you stay in this stagnated place. So he is definitely going to do things to get us out of that funk, not to make you feel good for a moment. And that's how the world is. The world has a way of making you feel good in the moment. And because people say things that you want to hear in that moment, yeah, it make you feel good, but you realize later you're still stuck in that same funk. And I think that's a lot of what goes on now. We come across things on the internet or on social media. It sounds real good. The hype is all good, but I am saying this because who's tired of those seasons of being hyped up? Who's tired of those seasons of just hearing something that feel good, and in that moment it gets you out of the funk, but you realize not even a few days later you're back to where you started. So you have to hear the truth sometimes, and the truth doesn't always feel good, right? Even purpose, it doesn't always look good. So I was looking back at what God has shown me in that moment. And he was showing me that even in the ancient days, they would take oil, they would take grain, and they would take wine, and they would store it in jars, right? Nothing that is put in a container is just common. That means that it is something valuable. It is something to be stored and preserved. So God is preserving you. Yes, there were many seasons that I realized that God was preserving me, but this season it was a bit different. I was sharing this with my husband, and he began to give me his input, and he said, yes, he said, God has to preserve us because of the weeds that tend to grow up around the things that God is, the harvest that God has given to you. He doesn't want the weeds to choke out the grain. And I said, wow, I didn't think about it that way. I shared with him, when I seen the grain in the jar, I thought about in 2 Corinthians, I think Paul was talking about humanity, how we are earthen vessels, but we are clay jars, meaning the jar is not the treasure, baby. It's what's within the jar that is the treasure. But this is why I'm saying this too, and I'm going to insert this. I am lived a long time. I've been in relationships, but things that I have prayed for, I am currently living in those dreams. I've done so many events where I work with women, and now God is shifting me to where I'm working with men. So yes, my husband now does ministry with me. Are there still things that I do by myself? Yes, I have not let that go, but I love how God has brought my husband into my life, and we do ministry together, and it just goes hand to hand. And I'm saying that because I always have these aha moments when we begin to talk about we share like what God is saying and what God is doing. And so when I shared that with him, and he reminded me about the weeds choking out the grain, but I was thinking about the earthen jar, a clay jar. So again, it still goes together, because here it is. I'm a vessel. God is showing me I'm a vessel. You're a clay jar, but the jar is just the thing that is containing you right now. The jar is the thing that I have you in to preserve you. And so the insight that my husband reminded me is so that the weeds doesn't choke you out. When you are enclosed in something, you are engulfed in something, then it doesn't give anything the opportunity to have a say so. Sometimes God have to isolate you in a season because it's not about applause. I want to know, do you know your identity? Because I don't want so many opinions this time. I don't need a whole field of administration telling you who you are. You need to know who you are without the applause. You need to know who you are without people giving you their opinions or their advice, because I've worked in 24 years. Now here I go. Here's the shift. We think the practical things we do has nothing to do with purpose and what God is calling us to. I worked 24 years. That's over 2 decades and a half in customer service. And so it had become so programmable that I was used to, just serving. I was used to functioning in someone else's system that I had clearly just dismissed initiating architectural things to build on my own. If God is calling me to lead in a certain area in life, there are certain roles and responsibilities he will allow us the opportunity to experience, to build us, even build our character for the purpose-filled life that he is calling us to. At that season of my life, I may be in a little junior, just learning. But here I am now, baby. I'm a whole senior, because the things that intimidated me, now I have a different view. And that's why God was showing me, yes, I seen this spiraling going down in the soil. He is saying that grain, I didn't have to put it so far down in the soil, because the seeds, there's are levels in the ground that you would plant the seed, right? But when it comes to spiraling, he's showing me, no, that's because you're deeply rooted. When I deeply root you, that means that you're going to rise real, real tall. That means that it's something weighty about you. And all those times where you were thinking, oh, I'm misunderstood. No, baby, you were ahead, because you understand that you are different. You understand that you are set apart. So everything's not going to look like what everybody think it should look like, or how you think it should go. And so now with a different view, God, I'm seeing that it wasn't so bad. It's the same landscape down there, but I have a different view. I'm no longer intimidated by what seemed to be a huge issue, what seemed to be a real problem. Now I'm looking, and I can see that I didn't see the logistics of what God was doing. I was in survival mode working, baby, at a job trying to get an income, but I didn't see the logistics of him trying to put me in a position of leadership, because I was getting so many promotions. I was used to response more than I was initiating. So now when I was given a promotion, these were the words that were said to me. This is the highest level of promotion, and we want you to supervise these group of people. And I declined. I, in that moment, felt intimidated by the role. I felt intimidated by the position. And I was like, I can't do this. Also, because most of the people were my friends, and I didn't know how to separate business from friendship. But here's the clarity. It wasn't that I was intimidated. Those were the things that was engraved in my head, that slave mentality. The thing that I was afraid of was the identity shift, or I didn't recognize the logistics of the identity shift. That's what God was doing. And that's what causes so many delays in our lives, because we don't recognize the logistics of what God is doing. The shift is going to require a different version of your identity. And God is summoning you to a season of your life, but you're calling it fear, or you may be saying, I don't have peace about this. We keep trying to put labels on ourselves that is causing a delay, as if God is going to sign off on that. And God only signs off on what is the truth. In other words, only thing that is being signed off on is access denied. I can't allow you to shift to your next season because you are not taking the verbiage, and you're not taking the clarity, you're not taking the logistics, you're not even taking the ride to the next level. So if you want to stay here, you want to make excuses, you want to put these cute labels on some things, then your seasons are going to be denied. And it doesn't matter how many times you go to God emotional, crying, the truth is not going to change. His love for you, he's going to always love you, but the truth is what God is standing on. And that's all he can represent. God represents the truth. He's repping the truth. And whatever time he on, that's what type of time I'm on. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I know a lot of people, you're hearing so many people talk about identity. So many people talk about purpose. So many people talking about the call on your life. And it all sounds so cliche, but I'm telling you this because there's so much wisdom and knowledge behind the things that keep showing up as cycles, keep showing up as a reflection of who you were 10, 20, 5, 6 years ago. And nothing has changed. You can't go with I call it a slave mindset, because we want to go into something new, but still holding on to the same frame, still holding on to the same feelings and emotions and stories that once shaped us, that once molded us, and they don't work in this place that God has you in. And so it's going to come with being misunderstood, and it's going to come with being denied by some people because they don't understand. Guess what? If you're denied by some people, then that's not the area that God is calling you to. If you're misunderstood by some people, it's not personal. It's just that this is just what it is. And you have to know that that's how it works. So this is where God gives to you spiritual insight and spiritual wisdom to understand that some of the things that you're going to go through is not going to look glamorous. Joseph's life didn't look glamorous. He was in the pit, thrown in the pit by his family, sold off into slavery. Once he arrived in Egypt, he still had favor on his life, but he was falsely accused, thrown into prison. Again, purpose doesn't look glamorous, but favor was still on his life. Being in the right place at the right time, it positioned him. He was in a range. That means you being in proximity where you're supposed to be, so that when it's your time to rise, you can be found. So don't try to take yourself out of seasons that doesn't feel good or look good, if that's where God has you rooted and grounded and anchored, because you're supposed to be able to endure and withstand whatever season God is putting you through. And because you don't want to go through it, because it doesn't feel good, then you say it's not God. But God is using that season, which was meant to take you out, but it's really a season that's going to build you up. And it's a season that's going to make you rise tall above circumstances, above being conditioned, above being shaped and molded. You're going to break free from that identity that was engraved in you as a child, or has been engraved by circumstances, by conditions and certain experiences that you had. You've graduated from so many things. Stop trying to stay at a level as if you are still controlled, if you are still conditioned, as if you are still dealing with those same situations. They don't exist no more, baby. You make some new ones and move on to the place in which God is calling you to. That's it. That's all. I just wanted to share that with you. I get so excited because that's the field that God is calling me to. When it comes to purpose, identity, and calling, baby, I get all wired up. So yeah, this message is for you if you are listening, because God is calling you to new grounds. So if God is calling you to a place that is foreign, don't sit there and contemplate on any excuses and talk yourself out of your purpose place. Let's get to the places that God is calling us to and separate ourselves from fear, separate ourselves from intimidation, and let's get to the truth. All of those things is really growth. It's really growth. Get out of your comfort zone and walk into the will that God has already promised you. Love you guys. Y'all have an amazing day.